Welcome, everybody, to the Week 7 Best and Worst Predictions, along with our recap of the year to date leaders through Week 6. Uh, we're your guys from CFF Lists. This is Jay Mill. I got my partner, Willie B, as usual. How you doing, Willie?
Doing great. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it seems like it was a pretty good Week 6 all around in all of my leagues. I think I heard the same message coming from you on all of your leagues, and we had a squeaker in the Kings Classic to get to 6-0. We maybe thought a little bit too much about our quarterback situation. We could talk about a dumb decision that we ended up making there later, but we made it through. We survived to go to 6-0 in the one that we feel matters the most this year. So I'm happy about all of that, and we're happy to bring these recommendations of who we think the best and worst guys are going to be for this week. As we talk through the list of top 12 and top 16 at all the different positions to give you an idea of maybe who you should start and who you should sit on your rosters. So, Willie, I think you're ready to jump in. You wanted to move the order around this week, and instead of waiting for last, wanted to jump into quarterbacks.
Yeah, I felt like they were, obviously, I think people feel like quarterbacks are a little bit more important.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to see some tiers kind of shape up, and I think they'll probably shake out to about three different tiers, possibly in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So kind
All
of,
right.
bump them up. And we usually start being a little bit more wordy in the beginning, and that's usually tight ends. And, let's not waste that time on tight ends.
I hear you. Yeah, but before we run out of gas, we'll jump into the probably the most important position. I will say, last week we had a pretty impressive week. I believe we do keep score here, and Willie ended up winning the week 13-11. But we ended up scoring points, meaning we picked the best, one of the top three in the best or worst category in all but one category collectively. And if I'm looking here, it looked like we did not get the worst of the running back group. But we'll cover kind of what happened there when we get to it. It doesn't mean we necessarily made a horrible pick, but um, we landed quite a few. In terms of picking the top three and the best and worst. Beginning with my pick here at quarterback with Byron Brown, who I predicted for a second week in a row would be the best. He failed me 2 weeks ago, but this week he did not disappoint with his 46.5 that he ended up getting against UAB and what it ended up being a shootout, which helped me out quite a bit there in a 56-35 game. I know you had Salter, who ended up not doing so bad. He had 24.1, which, maybe on another week would have, gotten him into that top three. But uh, by my numbers, 4 out of the 11 top quarterbacks this week, there were 12 quarterbacks obviously in the top 12, but one of them had a bye. So 4 out of those 11 that played actually ended up getting over, 32.5 points, which is pretty impressive. 7 out of the 11 ended up getting over 20.5 points, which your guy was part of, Salter. So, even though you didn't score any points for having him in the top three, Salter still ended up, putting out a pretty decent performance with his 24.1. Any thoughts on those guys?
No, I mean you said it much, pretty much everything. Salters, well, he was just still a good play. I mean, you can't
Yeah,
argue, getting fourth.
right. Or
Didn't get any
24
points, but
points. Yeah, you can't
oh
be
yeah,
mad about 24 points. I agree.
absolutely not.
Right, right. And um, where you actually hit and got some points, though, where you were absolutely on the money was with Rayner from Arkansas State. He ended up being the second worst with 6.7 points. What's very interesting is there are three quarterbacks that got bumped from the top 12. Rayner is one, and we said it was going to be interesting because just the week before, the defense that Rayner played, which was Troy, just finished knocking Granger out of the top 12 from just about that same spot. I think he was like in that number 6 spot. And here we go. Another quarterback plays Troy. Another quarterback gets bounced from the top 12. So you've been pretty on point with those defenses that you're identifying as far as who you might want to stay away from playing your quarterbacks against.
Right. I mean, in a lot of it too is going to be you can't expect everyone to be great every week. but then you couple that with a good defense, and that's why I was like, no, let's not do that. And then he ended up with 6.7 when he
Right.
had in the 40s the previous 2 weeks.
Right, right. So good job there. We gave everybody their warning on that one. Uh, hey, I'm actually pretty proud of myself though. Even though I didn't score any points with picking one of the top three worst performers, Dart finished fourth worst. So I'm actually pretty happy about that because I think I went out on a little bit of a limb after he had, had such a big week the week before. Um, I think I even mentioned immediately following, I felt like I might have started to have a little buyer's remorse, but I stuck by the pick, and he only ended up having 13.4. So in terms of what you were saying, as far as guys not, you know, being able to come out every week and perform, there's your example. Dart, I think, was a high 30-point scorer the week before, um, against I forget who he was playing, but he had
LSU.
LSU, and then this week against Arkansas did much worse.
Yeah,
13.4. So
yeah.
uh,
The only problem with Dart and what I was kind of doubting it, and when you were doubting yourself, said, I was thinking, no, you're okay. He's been
mhm,
up and down also. I mean, you
mhm,
go back 5 weeks ago against Tulane, 22.7. Then he has a great game against Georgia Tech, 39.6. Then he falls back down when they played Alabama, up again against LSU. So he's just been up and down.
right, and
And
he's
so now they have the buy, so maybe he
yeah,
can fix that.
get it back together for the next week. Yeah, you definitely want to find consistency. The two at the top here haven't changed. You got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, two of the most consistent. Brown's proven to be getting more consistent. He passed up Salter, and then Dylan Gabriel. Now is when we can kind of uh, look at ourselves and wonder what were we thinking. We put Dylan Gabriel on the bench, thinking the Texas in the Kings Classic, thinking that Texas might be a little too tough for him. And there's an old adage we even discussed, which is you never bench your best player, no matter who they're playing. Uh, but we even went against that rule, and we have promised that we will not do that again all year long because we nearly lost our game in the Kings Classic by putting Gabriel on the bench. But thank God it didn't come back to hurt us. Because he's only up one spot, but he's proven that he is going to get in the 30 range no matter what, week in and week out. And you talk about consistency. There's one of your guys. Um, a
I
few,
I think I think more of it though, J Mel, is that I had it in my mind that this was probably going to be a 2017 type of game,
mm-hmm,
because the defenses were being hyped up, and it's quick to forget that he had to miss this game. So I mean, he had to wait another year to get in this game,
he's
and
a little
he did
hungry.
not. And he didn't disappoint. I mean, now he only had the one through the air, but he did have another score. But like you said, yeah, don't bench your studs. It's time for him to put his hat in the Heisman. Uh, you know, After this bye, they got what, UCF, at Kansas, at Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU, and TCU. So
That sounds good. That sounds good for a leader right there.
right, right.
And if you've got him, follow our lead. Do not put Gabriel on the bench. We were one of the few groups that had Gabriel in the top 8 in the preseason, or even the top really 15, 20. I don't know many people that had him in their top 15. We went on a little campaign saying that Gabriel would return to top 10 status. He's sitting here at number 5, and I don't think he's leaving the top 10. I'll stand by our preseason number 8 ranking that we gave him. He's here to stay.
Yeah, and we can talk about it a little bit further when we get to the wide receivers. Let's not get it twisted as far as the Kings Classic. We were sweating, but once
Oh yeah, yeah.
midnight struck.
So the guys we're missing here are Schrader and King. I think that Schrader may be a guy that pops back in at some point, but um, we'll see with King as far as Haynes King from Georgia Tech. The guy I want to talk about though last is one of the three guys that is brand new here is Thomas Castellanos. Um, he's a guy that if he is not on your radar, put him there. He's got a bye week this week. Maybe you catch somebody slipping, or maybe you're in a league that's got these small benches we talk about where kind of just, guys you would never expect to be available are available. But he was on the waiver wire, and he was specifically on my waiver watch team, you know, 2 out of the first 5 weeks, or 2 out of the first 4 weeks, I believe. And the message I kept presenting was that he's scoring between 22 and 28 points every week. Well, apparently that's not all he can do. It looked like he was going to be kind of just your steady guy that might not get you 30, but he's definitely not going to get you below 22. Well, he proved that wrong this week with 41.2, uh, which is kind of what vaulted him into the top 12. You could see he was already at 16 based on a really good, solid, average in the mid to lower 20s. But that 41 has shot him up to 29.8. Now, I'm not sure he's going to stay at 29.8. He's probably going to be a guy that hovers around 25 or 26, but that might get him into the top 12 by the end of the year, because some of these guys aren't going to maintain their numbers. So Thomas Castellanos is the one guy I want everybody to have on their radar. And he is, as our guy Nino mentioned in the waiver draft, one of the top running quarterbacks, in the NCAA, in his class. And Boston College is using him like you said, I mentioned, like they're a service academy the way they're running him. almost 20 times a game. In some situations. So there's my guy. I'll save Drake May for you. Got any notes on Drake May and one of the
Oh
other guys?
yeah. Well, I'm happy you mentioned that because, like I said, do not forget about Drake May because the thing is about Drake.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was averaging about maybe 23, 24 points a game, but you got to understand, he just got his best wide receiver back.
Right, and he's
And
at 41.8. Very similar to
exactly.
Castellanos. Actually, they both had like 2 games in the low 20s, 2 games in the mid 20s. Then they both break out and kind of end up at 41 something this week. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point you make though. He's got his connection there. It looks
Yeah.
like. And
And so now with Walker back, I just think, especially in the next couple of weeks, and they have some nice tune-ups. I mean, you get Miami, you're not sure what Miami's going to do. They get Virginia at Georgia Tech, and then they play Campbell. So I would
right,
imagine in the next month he should probably be putting up those Heisman type numbers that people were expecting from him
right,
early in the preseason. So
and that sounds like
that's one to watch.
Campbell would be, sounds like, by where you placed him. That's probably like beginning of the playoffs. So it looks like North Carolina's doing the old tricky SEC, FCS matchup late in the season to try to get their legs back under them.
Yep, week 10.
I think we should get into some picks in terms of who we think will be the best and the worst. And I know you've said, you've got it on record that you're going to either pick Williams, Salter, or Penix every week. Will you stick with that? I'm going to put you on the spot and make you go first here to see if you stick with your statement there, picking only one of those three.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I've Salter, let me down a little bit, but fourth place, I'm not going to sweat that. But I'm going to stick with it.
Okay.
This guy, let's see, what did he end up with last week? And it took the three OTs to do it, but he still had 36.9.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go Caleb. And I know they play at Notre Dame, but this is one of those statement games, he's showing who he is, but now is the time.
Right.
So this can be his Heisman moment, and Penix is playing Oregon. Gabriel's off, like we talked about.
Right.
So,
And Salter,
you know,
we're recording this on a Tuesday, and
hmm
Salter is playing tonight. So just so we can make it clear, we're making this pick before Salter's game. Unfortunately, if we pick him, you probably won't hear this until Wednesday morning, when it won't help
right,
you. But just to make it interesting, since I don't want to I might lean him, but like I'm going to go with my guy Brown again against FIU. Let's say third time's a charm. The second time was a charm also, but I have no reason to believe that Byron Brown will slow down at all. FIU is 78th against quarterbacks according to Fantrax, and 83rd against the pass in general. You're giving up 9 touchdowns already this season, nearly 2 a game. So I think Byron Brown is definitely top 3 candidate here again, and it'll be the 3rd week in a row I pick him. I have a feeling I'm going to go 2 out of 3. So let's maybe I'll get off the Brown train next week just to mix it up, but I want to see if I can get 2 out of 3 out of Brown.
Yeah, and since we are recording this before the games on Tuesday, I will go ahead and give you guys a nugget. I'm going to say I'm taking Salter, barring he's healthy and coming out of tonight's game next week, next
Hmm.
Tuesday. That will be my pick, and they're going to play Middle Tennessee State,
Okay, I
and
like
they have Tuesday games the next 3 weeks. So
it. Okay.
all of them will be we'll be doing the show before those games, but next
Yeah.
week I am taking Salter, so there you
There's your
go.
week advance. There's your notice a week in advance since this drops on Wednesdays. Willie B is doing you a favor and letting you know a full week ahead of time. Week 8, you should be playing Salter too.
Right.
With that, who do you think is going to perform the worst this week? We've got a couple guys on bye, so that really just narrows us down to picking among 9 guys here for the best and worst. But out of these 9 guys actually playing this week, who's going to have the worst output?
All right, I'm gonna go on a limb, and I'll say it's going to be Jaden Daniels. He is a little bit banged up. So they may have to. I mean, and that Missouri game was nice. They won 49-39. I felt like it. In a lot of instances, it was a lot closer than that. They came back and did what they needed to do. But maybe rely on the backs a little bit more this week. So I'm gonna pick Jaden because, like I said, there's no bad quarterbacks if they're in the top 12. So you got to pick one.
Right, that's right. And I definitely see Penix out to prove something here. That's going to be a heck of a game. Can't wait for that Washington Oregon game. Oregon's pretty solid against the pass, but I don't think it's necessarily enough to shut him down. They're actually fifth against the pass and have only given up 6 touchdowns. Actually, that's maybe more than you would have imagined. They're fifth in the passing yardage, but still giving up 6 touchdowns is the way I should have worded that. Um, so I think Penix will get his scores. Cameron Ward, he's going to be looking to bounce back also against Arizona. And Arizona is kind of mediocre against the pass. But I'm going to maybe take the easy way out here. I'm not sure Delore is going to be healthy. Uh, the guy that they've got playing in his place has been doing pretty good. There's no need to rush him back. So I'm going to roll the dice a little bit and assume that because of the questionable status, I'm not quite ready to put Delora back in any game just yet, especially since we may not know much more about his health until pregame. Um, a lot of you guys aren't even able to check in, right before the games kick off. So why take a chance this week? And let's just keep Delora on the bench.
Yeah, I'm not going to understand that. I mean, they have the bye the week after,
Hmm.
so why risk it? So I can understand that. That's not a bad one. That's one I probably should have paid attention to. But
Okay.
I still
Well,
like Daniels.
at least we got the heads up in there, to
Right,
keep a
right.
serious eye out for that injury. So with that, we'll roll it on up to the tight ends, where we have probably the most consistent week of performances by the top group. Uh, Certainly the least turnover we've had in the top 12 all year, with only 4 new tight ends in the top 12. Can you believe it, Willie?
Right. Yeah, well, stand up, I guess.
Right, right. The funny thing is that I did notice is 2 of the new guys that made it in at 11th and 12th are both guys that didn't even play, but maintained their points per game average. Conley at the bottom from Marshall and Olson at 12th from San Jose State both missed their last games. Olson's, I think, going on his second game missed, but because the guys that were sitting in those spots, didn't perform as well, they've kind of moved into the top 12 by default. You can see with last week's ratings, Conley was 13, Olson was 14, so they weren't sitting very. They were the next 2 guys up right outside of the top 12. So those guys falling out with weaker games, uh, which I'm looking now, looks like was your Jaheim Bells, your Fannons, Dalvin Smith, those 3 in particular, with them falling out, made room for Conley and Olsen to get in without even having played. Um, but we still include injured players here until they um, are only 50% or less of the games that they've played in. So as long as they've played in 51% or more of their team's games, we're including them in the listing here. The other notable name that's out, which once we get a notice that a guy's out for the season, we're bumping him regardless of what his average is, unless he's made it to like week 8 or week 9, and that's Haas from Arkansas. So knowing that he's going to miss more than half of his team's games, Willie B wisely noted that and bumped him from the top 12, uh, so that we won't have an easy pick there for the worst performer with Haas being on the list, knowing that he's injured. That wouldn't be fair. Um, and that's another one that made room for Olson to pop in. But with that said, the guys making their way in as a result of the other three, Bell, Fannin, and Dalvin Smith moving out, are Eric All from Iowa. Made a big jump. Martin Robinson's 31 points from Temple moved him all the way from 47 to 9. And that's back-to-back weeks that Martin Robinson's had double digits. There was a lot of preseason hype, including from us, and it looks like we're definitely not going to expect 31, but I think his average of 11 is something that you can grow to count on, more and more as each week goes. 3 is kind of the magic number in terms of proving yourself with us. Uh, and before we talk about the others that made their way in, Holden Willis is at the number 6 spot, locking it down there with his 3rd week in a row with double digits. That's why you saw him stay steady there at the number 6 spot. I know we talked about him in the waiver watch. Willie, you're a big fan of his.
Oh yeah, and we had been talking about numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and so because you were talking about how slight a build you thought he was and everything, and so he has one inline snap, meaning that one with his hand in the dirt.
Right.
And he's had 58 snaps in the backfield, and then 144 in various positions, playing that slot tight end or even as a wide receiver. So
Now in the backfield, for those not so familiar with where that can mean, that's probably in an H back spot, most likely, like
yes, yes, yeah,
a couple
yeah,
steps back right off the tackle. So still lining up probably in a traditional tight end spot, not necessarily always out. I looked him up after you mentioned that too, and he, I wasn't crazy. He is only 211 pounds according to the roster, and he looks like he's only barely 211 pounds. But Willie pointed out he's 6'4", so he's very slender. Um, but the build he has would indicate that he's probably a tight end they've got in the game for his athleticism more so than his strength, which is what we're trying to emphasize here. That he's still going to be moved all around the field and used really as a 4th wide receiver in some situations or a 3rd wide receiver for Middle Tennessee.
right. Like I said, I mean, if you're in the top 6, I mean, you deserve to be here. So I mean, he's been proving that the last few weeks. So
3 weeks in a row, yeah,
he's
that's what
earned
I
it.
said.
Yeah, he's earned
Yeah,
it. He's
we
earned it.
need Martin Robinson to prove that he's here to stay by doing it one more week, to give us his 3rd week in a row. Um,
Well, and
the guy,
the thing is about Martin Robinson, though. Sorry to cut you off.
that's all right.
Early in the season, he had against Norfolk because they were, blowing him out. He had the one catch for 19, and then in Florida, the Florida game, Miami of Florida, he didn't play. Uh, you
Okay,
know, so uh, so he's got 2 of those games that are on his average to where he, is
bringing it
bringing it
back.
down. And
Right,
and obviously he had a few snaps. He just didn't register any receptions or targets. So that's obviously it still counts. So that's why
right.
his
So,
average is kind of down. He probably belongs up around where Ben Sinnott is, to be honest.
right. That makes sense. And now that they're back and just playing their American schedule, that's more of an indicator that Martin Robinson should probably be here to stay. Um, uh, we're all in. I don't know too much about Eric All. I haven't necessarily been keeping my eyes on him. Do you have the numbers for him, Willie, that you could pull up just to see kind of what his track record's been this season? The fact
Yeah,
that he
he's
came
got.
up, yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
fact that he came
Go ahead.
from the 22 spot means he was probably hovering around 8 or 9 points prior to this week. But yeah, kind of what's the last few weeks looked like for him?
Yeah, no, I would say that before this, he was averaging 6.4, and the
Okay,
only differences is now he scored in the past 2 weeks in each
okay,
game. That's the
okay,
difference. So,
got it.
because he had 6.2, 6.4, and 6.5. those first three, against Iowa
Okay.
State, Western Michigan, and Penn State. And then the last 2 weeks, he's had 16.7 and 20.7. So you add those two touchdowns in there, that's why he's kind of bumped up.
Right, right. It looks like if nothing else, he's getting not a ton of targets, but he's getting a steady amount of targets. Probably was in that 3 or 4 range. Now he's converting those 3 or 4 targets into 3 or 4 catches, 4 touchdowns in
Mm-hmm.
some cases. So
Yeah,
that's
right.
you're in Lackey's out of there at Iowa, unfortunately. So it looks like he's proven to be the go-to guy at tight end for them. Uh, as far as jumps, Mitchell Evans made a nice jump. He's got 2 weeks under his belt now, so we'll be looking to see if he can repeat himself. Uh, Bowers, just to talk about how he did last week, was your pick for number one. You didn't really go out much of a limb anytime you picked Bowers, but he didn't disappoint. He was the top tight end um, out of the top 12. Now, you heard me mention earlier, Martin Robinson was the top tight end for the week. But he wasn't in the top 12 last week. Willie picked Bowers as his number one tight end. He was picking among the top 12. Bowers ended up being the best tight end from the top 12. So he got 3 points for that. I picked Holker. Unfortunately, I'm not disappointed. Holker got 11 points, but because the tight ends in the top 12 finally had a really good week collectively, 11 points was only sixth among the tight ends last week in the top 12, which is saying something. We're finally seeing some consistency here uh, among a group that we've kind of dogged out all year for just being like musical chairs in terms of the rotation we were seeing. So I think look at this. We've got in the top six, all six of those guys were in the top seven last week. So I think we're starting to see like the group of real contenders, step above the rest of the group here.
Yeah, and the thing is with Holker, he didn't have that touchdown. So that's
Right,
that's bringing him down a little bit. So he went
right.
from
But he still
19.4 and he only had 11 this week. So
But he still got you 11 as a tight end without a touchdown, which is
that's right.
something to
That's
be
right.
happy about there. If you had him, Stover's kind of solidifying his spot. Rex is finally proven to be consistent after a couple of rocky years where he was up and down and disappointing. The warning I'll give on Conley from Marshall, who's kind of in by default at 11, even after sitting for a week, is I had watched him against Old Dominion 2 weeks ago. Felt like he wasn't going to play this week just based on kind of seeing him go in and out of the game with what looked to be like a knee injury. Maybe it was just some sort of leg injury. They won't tell us. He's finally got the red flag on Fantrax. They've picked up on the fact that he is hurt, even though the school hasn't said anything about it, which is normal. The schools don't have to tell us. So they usually don't tell us when a guy's hurt. It's up to the beat reporters, uh, you know, to try to kind of figure out what's going on and leak out some information. Uh, I would say still be a little bit hesitant about Conley. Um, there wasn't a reason to play him against North Carolina State since it wasn't a conference game. Uh, but there's no guarantee he's back this week, so keep a close eye out on the reports there. My warning on Olsen is similar. He's missed 2 games, but Mazzotti has done very good, and they had typically been kind of a 1A 1B situation with Olsen and Mazzotti. I think because you're seeing Mazzotti do so well, there's probably not going to be a need to rush Olsen back. So, be very hesitant also about Olsen. Just because you see those guys in here at number 11 and 12, make sure you do your research, as close to up to kickoff as you can to make sure they're even going to play. So, with that, I've kind of issued my warnings. Do you have anything to say about the rest of the group, Willie? Anybody else before we get into our picks?
No, we'll cover that here in just a second. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first, and I'm going to take my easy option. I'm going to go with my worst pick. And I kind of just again showed my cards here. I think Olsen is probably the least likely of Conley and himself to play, so I'm going to put that red X on Olsen. I don't trust that he's going to be back. Looks like New Mexico is really good against tight ends, even if he does make it back. And like I said, Mazzotti is doing a pretty good job there at San Jose State. So there's not a reason to force him back sooner than he needs to. So I think out of the two guys we know are injured, I'm going to go with Olsen as my worst performer because even though he's listed as questionable at the moment, I doubt he plays. Okay. All right. Well, you made that quick, so you didn't give me much time to think about this. As
I
far as
can go first. It's up to you.
no, let me keep to
Okay.
the order here. I like to keep it fair and square.
All right.
And, defenses that have, according to Fantrax, are not very good against tight ends. You've got Stover versus Purdue, Eric All versus Wisconsin. I'm just not convinced those guys are real game breakers. I think they're going to be steady and get their, you know, 10, 11, 12 points. But I like a guy like Mitchell Evans, who's on a nice trajectory and seems to be getting better each and every week, as my number one pick for the week. I'm going to go Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame against USC. USC, as we've all seen, is very susceptible to giving up yards against the pass. And according to Fantrax, who you kind of got to keep your fingers crossed that these rankings are accurate, but they seem to be 107th against tight ends in terms of giving up fantasy points. So because of the opponent and because of his trajectory and meaning more to that offense each week, I'm going to go Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame.
All right, see that. I'm going to go. Um, and I know I'm giving away with some picks here, but we want to make sure that you still remember, they're going to be Tuesday games now, so you better
Right.
prepare. So just because I'm taking Brock Bowers again this week, um, giving you another sneak peek for next week, and that's going to be Holden Willis, but that'll be for next week. But giving you another sneak peek for next week in case you do miss this. Um, Bowers is the number one tight end in the country. I'm sorry, it's not that way in our standings here, but he will soon overtake Holker.
Right. And I'm looking, Vanderbilt is also 114th against the pass. I know it says they're 72nd against tight ends, but they're also 114th against the pass in general in terms of yards given up. And
Mhm.
they've given up 15 touchdowns, 15
Right.
passing touchdowns. That's
And 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 so if Bowers produces this week, he'll have his bye. Holker will then, they'll travel out to UNLV, who's not too shabby, and then they have Air Force the week after. So this is going to you're going to see that shift of Bowers taking over the number one spot.
It looks like 15 is the most touchdowns given up, or second most given up all season. Fortunately for me, USC is another team that's done that. I think they have the extra game in there also. Maybe not. I'm not sure how if they played week 0, but I can't remember if they had a bye or not. But either way, USC and Vanderbilt both have given up a lot of passing TDs, and we expect that to stay the same. So with that, let's get it on up to the wide receivers.
Right. And then, while we transition up here, yeah, they have had that bye.
Okay, so yeah, 15 touchdowns, in 5 games for USC and Vanderbilt against those tight ends that we picked. As far as the wide receivers, uh, we've only got 3 new ones, which means there's 3 that are out. I think McMillan, you bounced him, due to missing the games from an injury. Um, you've got Trey Harris, who just had a really bad game for Ole Miss with only like 3 or 4 points, depending on how your league scores it. And Eric Brooks from Fresno State, who was really falling off in terms of targets. He was one of those guys getting double-digit targets for the first couple of games of the season, uh, but he's just fallen off. He's like 5 or 6 targets a game now, and it's not that they're passing less; it's just that other guys on the team are getting more targets. They've kind of stolen his looks. So um, I don't know that you see Brooks make it back. Trey Harris, you never know. He is Mr. Inconsistency, where he could have a 30-point game and be right back here next week, but it's probably not the kind of guy you want to play week in and week out. Hopefully you have him in best ball and he's getting you those 30 points when it happens. But a week like last week, that's why you probably don't want to have Trey Harris in your lineup week in and week out. And then with Eric Brooks just on the decline, he's one that you probably won't make his way back here if I had to guess. McMillan, on
Well,
the other hand, if he gets healthy and gets another game, I think you do see McMillan from Washington make his way back.
and I'm not too sure that it's not because of his build. We're talking about Eric Brooks. I mean, 5'7" and 171, and that's probably just soaking wet. So it's probably
Mm-hmm.
more of about 160.
Yeah,
Some of that takes a toll when you're that
yeah,
size.
and that's
So
interesting. That's a good point. A lot of these players, unfortunately, because we can't watch 60 games a week and look up 1,000 different players' height and weight. We typically do look up 1,000 players' stats. Uh, Sometimes you just don't know what their build is until it comes to something like this, where you hear about it or you happen to randomly look. I had no idea the guy was that small, and
right, yeah.
you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing if he's producing, getting the ball, in space and making things happen. But Uh, yeah, who knows? Maybe he's been banged up then, and it's just they don't want to use him as much because of that. That could be a number of factors, but it's really interesting. A lot of these guys are just names and numbers, a lot of times, and you forget to see
Hmm.
how big they are or how much they weigh, and how much that might affect things.
Yeah, because
Um,
because we look at a month ago when he had 11 targets against East Washington. He had 15 against Arizona State. So the
right,
last 3 weeks he's gone 5, 3, and 4 targets.
right, right.
So
Um, yeah, and now moving in, you got some fun names here. You've got the number one receiver of the week, I believe, with Malachi Corley, who, was sitting out there pretty far at 34th. Made his way all the way into at number 8 after a huge week. And then the guy Willie mentioned earlier that helped us out, to finish off our and come back and get the win in the Kings Classic, Cowing from Arizona, he made it in from even further out than Corley. With the game he had, he was a top 3 or 4 guy overall. With I think 38 or 40 points. So he jumped all the way from 44th to 13th. And those are both names that even though they were sitting out there at 34 and 44, now that they're here, we like to talk about who's leaving, who might be a fluke, or who might be the real deal. I don't know that either one of those names are going to leave the top 16 anytime soon. I'd tend to put my money on the fact that Cowing and Corley might be around for the rest of the season. What do you think, Willie?
no, I think you might be right. I mean, Corley's he
Mm-hmm.
had a really bad game early in the season. No, South Florida,
Mm-hmm.
where he had 9.5. So he's been steadily building back his resume after that. So even he had 6 targets then. Since then, he's gone, 13, 15, 13, and 12 targets the last 4 games. So, you
Right.
know, he's coming on strong. Their schedule shapes up to be, what it should be. So he's the guy to me that definitely pay attention to. So I like what he's done. Obviously, who I really love is still Lacey and Neighbors, and then let's not forget about Luther Burden and what he's been putting up.
Well, that's good timing to mention those guys because we were going to get into kind of how we fared this last week in week 6 in terms of our best performers. Lacey was my choice. Um, this will be the third time we've mentioned it in a row, making sure you hone in on this fact that Voisin is gone for the season at South Alabama. We said Lacey was going to do even more than he had been with Voisin out. That's turned out to be absolutely true. He had 28.6 last week. I picked him as the best receiver. He ended up being the second best among the top 16. Um, and you didn't do so bad either. You didn't get points for Burden. You picked Burden to be the best. He finished fourth, but he still had 25.9 points. So kind of goes back again. For the competition, you didn't score any points, but anybody that took your advice and put Burden in was going to be happy. And I'd be shocked if anybody that has Burden didn't have him in at this point, the way he's been playing.
I'd hope not.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
you play your bet, you play your best guys. He had 19 targets and he had 11 receptions for 149 yards. He did not score, so he still had 25.9 even though he didn't score.
Um, But with that, let's get into a little best worst discussion and see it's your choice to go first. You can go worst or first, or worst or best. Let's see what you got for receivers this week.
I'm still going to go, and like I said, I do not know if this kid's going to play, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm even if he does, he's still going to have to show me something. These other guys that I'm looking here, they've shown me enough to get a little bit of vote of confidence. So I'm taking Gage. I'm staying away. If it happens, he won't be on our list until he actually does play another two
Mm-hmm.
games. So we'll
Right.
go Larvadain.
Meaning, if Larvadain does not play because of injury this week, he will not qualify to make the list, and you won't see him here again.
Exactly right.
I want to lean that way also, but I'm trying to see if there's an interesting pick that I could make just to mix things up a little bit. Um, but honestly, everybody down there around him is either so talented that I don't want to put the X on them, or they're playing a team that is really weak, which is going to keep me from putting the X on them. So I'll join you in choosing Larvadane as the weakest pick out of the top 16 that you want to stay away from. Um, if you picked him up 2 weeks ago, this is do or die. If he doesn't get in the game this week, I don't know how much longer you keep him, honestly. Um, because you can't just hold a roster spot, all season long for a guy that, you're not even sure when he gets back if he's going to get the targets since he only had one target in his two last games that he did play, and now he's going on 2 games missed. So let's see what happens there, and not recommend Larvadane for anybody just yet. And then let's see if you go back to Burden for your best pick. Let's see what you got, Willie.
I want to know, and we'll, like you say, we'll never know these things. How healthy is Horton?
Mm-hmm.
I see it a little flag because he had 3 for 20, and
Right.
so that means a little bit something to me. So that's another name that you guys might want to just pay attention to. As far as Burton is concerned, no, I still don't. I, man, that Kentucky thing, it's like I say, Kentucky and Duke, they're just not basketball schools, anymore. Ooh, this is tough. I'm gonna, despite I know they're not playing USC this week. I got to give the nod to the kid. We're gonna go Jacob Cowing.
Okay.
I'm gonna go all the way down here to Jacob Cowing. He moved, he like I say, he moved up from the depths, with his 42.8. But even before that, he had 16.3, 24.4, 16 and a half, and then 20. So
Mm-hmm.
he,
He,
he he's he,
he's been safe, and then he was very explosive this week. And
right.
Washington State's 107 against the pass, 72nd against wide receivers specifically. Not giving up a lot of touchdowns, but they're definitely giving up a lot of yards. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get in the end zone.
And like I said, I mean, it's one of those things, and just so you know, I don't know how you do this, but I don't go into this and look at this list for the list isn't ready until Monday for us to put this together. So it's not that I've had 48 hours to go and look and see, okay, who are we going to take?
Right.
Some of this is still on the fly based on what we see and how we think they're going to perform. So
Yeah, and
this it.
I think part of the fun is not, we've analyzed it as we put the list together, and we know a lot of the players' history from doing it week to week. But I think part of the fun is, we don't want to have our answer in stone before this, so that people can kind of hear the thought process, play out, live, and kind of what we're thinking about the pick. So that's respectable. Um, I'm going to go with the guy I almost went with last week, which is LeJontay Wester. Um, I love what the opportunity looks like they're playing against USF, who gave up 56 points against UAB last week. So uh, I don't know that they're going to be able to tighten up that defense at all in another week here. Florida Atlantic's been pretty solid on offense. Wester's had a ton of targets. Um, so, just looking at South Florida's ranking, they are 124th against the pass. Um, so I love the opportunity Wester has here to get a ton of yards and get in the end zone. They've given up 13 touchdowns, so he's got a good chance of making his way into the end zone this week.
Yeah, and the thing is, if he does get in the end zone, you know, that's when he's going to be around that 25 to 30 range, because
Right,
he's he only has 2 touchdowns on the season. So,
right. But his targets are outrageous.
oh,
About
absolutely they are. Yeah,
he
and
was
and he's a 100-yard machine also.
right, right. He's a guy getting 10 to 12 targets a game, 8, 9 catches for those 100 and some odd yards. So
Hmm.
he's a lot of his average here. You're seeing that 23.3, like Willie said, is without much scoring. So you can rely on him to get your points even without getting into the end zone, just on volume alone. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'll,
yeah.
I'll happily stand by the Wester pick this week. I'm looking forward to that.
So just so you see his numbers, 52 receptions for 499 yards, and then so those 52 receptions on 64 targets. So I
Right.
mean, he's putting in that work and like I say, getting consistent. I mean, he was 2 yards shy of having 4 straight 100-yard receiving games. So just 2 yards shy of that.
So yeah, put your money on Wester. Let's go. Get him in your DFS lineups for sure.
All
But
right.
yeah, let's we'll close it out here with running backs as we scroll up. I'll mention that you'll see 4 new names here, which means 4 are out. Um, Starting with the guys on their way out, unfortunately, a couple of them, looked like they were on their way to pretty good games and ended up getting injured, which are Ott from California, who I
Hmm.
suspected might be injured because I was watching his score in that late game, and he didn't move off of that 9.2 the entire second half. And then I did see I think he only played one series the second half and didn't return. So Ott is out, and also Whaley, unfortunately. Whaley, has come back from injury with a force. Um,
Right.
but he went out on an ugly, leg injury. It looked like it could be his knee. I don't know if it was the same knee that was hurt, just before camp or during camp. But the announcers certainly didn't make it seem like it was, a small thing. It looked pretty bad, and Whaley had to take an exit early, even after having 14 points. But that wasn't enough to keep him here. But best of luck to those guys getting back. Hopefully they're not long term injuries, and they weren't as bad, or at least with Whaley wasn't as bad as it looked.
Yeah, because
Um,
they're actually saying that, right now it's a kind of a wait and see because he's actually listed as day to day. So
okay,
hopefully it
well that's
wasn't as
good.
bad as they
Yeah, that's
thought.
that's good. Maybe that means nothing showed up negative on the MRI, and he's just got some sort of strain there, no tears, and that's good news. So, but proceed with caution. Even though we're not going to be picking him as a best or worst since he's not on the list, you know, pay attention to Whaley's news if you've got him, because I know people that had him were excited. He came back and had such good games so quickly. Um, LaQuint Allen's gone also, and Giddens. Giddens, we kind of felt like was a fluke with the one big game that got him there. He's kind of bounced down. He's out. And LaQuint Allen, he hasn't done nearly what people thought he would do this season. Um, I don't know that he's a total failure by any means. He was in the top 16 and he's just now exiting. But I don't know that you'll see him work his way back into the top 16 with all the touchdowns and rushing yards that Schrader steals from him from the quarterback position. So those are your 4 out. Coming in, and I give props to Willie. Willie mentioned that a guy you would likely see move his way into the top 16 this week was Kamani Vidal from Troy. And boy, did he come in with a force. He had 42 and a half points this week. 3 of his 6 games this year have been over 32 points. So Vidal is by no means a fluke. I mean, he did have 2 single-digit games after week 1, but 3 of his 6 have been over 30. Uh, I don't think you look for 42 every week, but something in the high 20s, um, could be something that you wouldn't be crazy for expecting if you have him. And he's going against Army, so we'll see if one of us pick him as the top pick. But he's in. Nate Knoll has made his way back in. We thought he might be here, but he had a bye, and due to other guys dipping a little bit, he's back in. And same thing with R.J. Harvey. Actually, Harvey's got his bye this week, but he worked his way back in from number 20. And then a guy that we like a lot, another guy we picked up in the Kings Classic and we kind of saw coming was Kyrie Robinson for San Jose State. Jumped up from 32nd to 15 with a pretty big game. But he's been doing that the last 3 or 4 weeks and has been showing some consistency there, Mr. Robinson.
Mhm. I'm gonna throw one out here. Obviously, before we get to the picks, yeah, we can't pick this guy anyway because he's on a bye. But
Yep.
this Darius Taylor situation, I mean, to me, it was a Cinderella type of deal, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's pretty much over.
Okay.
Because we don't know what the injury is. They have a bye this week, then they play at Iowa, and then they have Michigan State. So, and then to me, I just don't see him, doing enough to get back. And then, are you going to trust him, come playoff time?
Right. Right.
So that to me is a name because obviously next week his name won't even be on this list.
Right, and he will have enough time to prove himself between now and then. And to look to see what the news is after the bye, if he's back. But
Hmm.
there'll be if you do have him and you have deeper rosters, you could hold on to him and see what happens.
Right.
Maybe the 2 weeks after the bye to see if he's a guy you hold on to for your playoff run. But there you've been warned. You've been warned by Willie B, who has been pretty accurate with these running backs this year.
Yeah. So uh, I guess I'm first here,
Yeah, if you
or
want to
is
make
it?
the first pick, I was going to say the only other note was watching Marshall. They ended up, competing against NC State, but interestingly, like Rasheen Ali didn't seem to appear in the last three series of that game. So, I called it on the Conley injury before it was made public. I'm not saying he's hurt. I'm just saying it was very interesting that he didn't come in over the last three series against North Carolina State. And it could have been that, they knew that they don't have to win that game. It's not going to affect whether they win the conference. Maybe they wanted to be safe with him and just keep him out once they got down by 2 touchdowns. A lot of things could have led to that, but check your notes, see if anything pops up on Ali, and proceed with caution. Again, I'm not saying he's hurt. There's no evidence of that, but something interesting did happen to where they kept him out at the end of that North Carolina State game. So let's
Yeah.
see what happens there.
That's real interesting because I did not know that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that it pays to listen to Jay Mill, and he's following Marshall. So
Yeah, I got your Marshall insight. So, yeah, with that, Willie, let's see who you got for best or worst. What are you going to start with?
well, if I start worst, where I'm going to go. I know he has been very productive. I just see the dip coming,
Mm-hmm.
just based on the opponent. So I'm gonna stay away from Blake Watson right now.
Okay. Yeah. You hate playing guys against Tulane, so that is consistent with your playbook for sure.
Right. I'm just gonna stay, stay on the safe side as far as as how I'm gonna
Okay.
proceed with this when we talk about two lanes and picks in general. I mean,
Right.
you have to see the patterns,
Right.
So
Well, the guy I'm gonna go with another guy for the third week in a row. I know I did this at quarterback with Byram as my best. I've picked Hampton 2 weeks in a row at the worst. Um, in this week, let's check the notes. I picked him to be worse. He only had 13.3, so that's 2 weeks in a row where Hampton didn't perform necessarily in the bottom three, but he was definitely in the bottom half. He's going against Miami, who's actually second against the rush in defense. So I've probably got more reason than ever now to pick, Omarion Hampton versus Miami as my worst pick.
okay. I still have faith in him. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, they have
Mm-hmm.
Walker back, so May is going to be a little bit more productive. But he's still getting his work done. The 13.3 came with no touchdown, which was the first time that
Mm-hmm.
he hadn't had a rushing touchdown. So I'm not going to give up on him just yet. I'm still going with the number one guy. Uh,
Well,
yeah,
of course he would this week. He let me down last week. I had picked him to be my best last week, and uh, you know,
20.3.
and he had 20.3, which wasn't horrible, but it wasn't his best. He didn't score many points the week I pick him, so I'm going to hold that against him this week. But did you
Well,
have any other thoughts on the why there?
he also lost two fumbles, so that
Right,
that was a good game. To be
right,
honest, I mean they beat San Jose State 35-27. So I mean that it was a hard fought game,
right.
and this may be one of the. I mean, we'll see what happens with Halani because after they play Colorado State this week, they have the bye.
Mm-hmm.
So and then they come and play Wyoming. So this is probably one of the last times I'm going to take Genty for a minute.
All
And
right.
then and then we'll talk about one more guy after this pick, but there's one other one that we definitely need to talk about before we end.
Oh yeah. I think I know who that's going to be. Well, I'll just talk you through this one, guys. I'm thinking for my best. I'm actually considering Carroll against Marshall because, again, as we mentioned, I've watched them a lot and watched them, very close every week. Um, and Marshall's given up a ton of long runs. I mean,
Yeah.
They're really underperforming in terms of like that containment and keeping guys from breaking those 40 and 50 yard runs. But I don't know that Carroll's got that speed. I know he's getting the rock a lot, but you know I don't know that he's got the speed to break it and score on those long touchdowns. So um, for that wanted to look at Jawar Jordan because we all know how great he did against Notre Dame. But the Pittsburgh rushing defense is 53rd, which doesn't sound great, but it's still in the top half. Uh, and I got a little nervous though because then I went to Vidal just to double check Army. It says Army's 24th against running backs, but I think I'm going to lean Vidal because when I look at their pure stats against the run, they're giving up 165 yards a game and are 101st overall against the run. So even though running backs, with whatever formula Fantrax uses, Army seems to be tough against running backs. Maybe that's because more teams pass the ball against them. Who knows? Um, I don't know, but I think Vidal's, as we mentioned, he's had 3 games over 30 points. He's coming off of a 42-point game. I won't ever expect a guy to get in the 40s every week, but I think Vidal can approach that 30-point number again this week against Army.
Yeah, well, if he still gets the carries like he's been getting, I mean, it's hard to find a running back who's getting 20 totes a game,
Right, right. He's your
and
one.
he's that guy.
Yep,
So
right. So
um,
you had mentioned
I wouldn't doubt it.
right. You had mentioned one other that you wanted to speak about. Is you wanted to talk about Mahdi?
Oh yeah, of course.
I know you've been watching those games closely and kind of giving the tweet reports in live time, and you mentioned that he was going to the injury tent. And it looked like he had hurt his hand or his wrist pretty
hmm
badly. So what do you have to say about that and Mahdi in
And like I
general?
said, and like I say, but then the kid he works his way back into the game and still had 34 carries. I
Hmm.
mean that's insane to me. But it just goes to show you how important he is to their offense also.
Right. Well, describe
Um,
though what happened. Like, when did that injury happen, and what did his hand look like when he came back in the game? For the people that didn't see
uh,
it.
yeah, I mean, so I mean, yeah, the photo that I had, it just didn't do it justice. But um, so you really couldn't tell, what the injury was. But obviously, I thought it might, be the palm of the hand or wrist or whatever. Just something seemed broke. Yeah, something seemed broken. But the way he came out of the tent, I mean, he was hustling up that tunnel trying to get out. He was looking back at the medical people like, come on,
Hmm.
as he's trying to, get inside and get it dealt with. But when he came back, I mean, he had one of those big, oversized lineman gloves, and they had that sucker taped and padded, and I mean, it looked like it just looked like if in the old cartoon when somebody gets their hand smashed and it's like 4 times the size.
Right.
That's just kind of what it looked like.
They
And
had put the cast on it. I didn't. I couldn't tell what was going on. It looked like they had maybe even put the soft cast in.
and yeah, and so and like I said, maybe that's what they wrapped around. Maybe they did do the soft cast and then wrap that around. But
Right.
he ended up having one catch after that also. So we'll see what happens this week as far as if he's good to go. But with them giving him the 34 carries, I think they've had enough time to figure out what they want to do.
The fact that they made sure to get him back in the game after that injury and utilize him as much as they did shows you how important he is to that team now. After the 2 big games of kind of back-to-back 40-point fantasy games, basically, not only has he become important to fantasy owners, he's important to his real life team at Texas State. Otherwise, you don't put a kid through that, even if he's saying I want to play. you know, if you feel like you've got a quality backup that can give you 90% of what he's doing, I don't think the coaches bring him back and even put him back in that game unless he's way better than everybody behind him. And that's what
Right.
it seems like is happening now at Texas State with Mahdi.
And not only that, I mean, like you say, importance to the team. I mean, it's just that confidence. I mean, they ended up losing that game, 34-30, but you know, the the way the team, was just the morale was a lot higher when he got back in the
Well,
game, and he still got pretty sure he had 105 after that after he came back in the game.
right, yeah. So, but again, that's another one to just keep an ear out for injury reports, even though they're tough to track down. proceed with a little caution with Monty because maybe in hindsight they think we didn't need to put him back in the game and we lost anyways, and let's give him a break and have 2 weeks, with Louisiana Monroe and then a bye coming up. So you never know which way a coach is going to think, and so you want to kind of keep an eye out on the progress report there if you can even get one. So we're finishing up with the running backs here. We're appreciative of anybody that's been tuning in up to this point. For these 4 or 5 weeks we've been doing the best and worst. Don't forget, you can catch the Waiver Watch Draft every Monday. If you haven't seen that, jump over to YouTube or now Spotify and find us in both locations at CFF Lists, along with on Twitter at CFF Lists and on Instagram at College Fantasy Football. This is Jay Mills signing off with my partner, Willie B. Willie B., any final words?
Yeah,
Willie?
thank you for watching and listening, and good luck.